Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Last week, in our weekly ism segment, I spoke with you about vigilantism. And one of the key points that I tried to emphasize was one that's pretty simple, but at the same time one we often miss, and one that's profoundly important. And that is the question of jurisdiction. Who or what has the proper authority to do what ought to be done? That when the wrong person does the right thing, they're still doing the wrong thing. That's what I was trying to emphasize. And I mention that today because so often in our day, we sort of practice the opposite of vigilantism. Vigilantism is private citizens doing the work of the government. But so often we have private citizens asking the government to do its work for them. Exhibit A would be the struggles that we've had with respect to issues of freedom of speech as it relates to the tech giants. We've had, for instance, let me go back a step further. One of the great debates that we've been engaged in over the last several years is not only over the wisdom of critical race theory, but more importantly about the legitimacy of teaching critical race theory in the government schools. And you have had a number of folks insisting that it's not happening, a number of folks saying it is happening and it should be happening. And more recently, legislation proposed, and I'm not even sure if any of it's passed fully, but maybe so, in various jurisdictions saying, hey, this can't be taught. And the very people who have been on the left taking the government's money in order to propagate their own peculiar worldviews are jumping up and down saying, hey, you're violating free speech when you're passing these laws saying we can't teach this stuff. Well, they're the same people who say we're violating laws when we say we don't want this stuff to be taught. Well, you're never going to solve this problem because it's based on, or it's inextricably bound to the problem of government schools. Government schools take everybody's money to teach some people's convictions. And it doesn't matter whether it's left-leaning people who take the money of everyone and teach left-leaning ideas that offend right-leaning people, or whether it's right-leaning people doing the same thing. It's wrong no matter what. It's wrong on the basis of the golden rule, call to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Well, now, moving forward, we've had a similar problem with respect to social media giants, big soch, I guess we'd call it, big soch, who, during the run-up to the election in 2020, just got profoundly brazen in using their ideology to inform their algorithms that determine what went out in front of people. These are the people who said, we're not going to allow the president to use these platforms to speak. And there was a lot of careful argumentation back and forth, a lot of not careful argumentation, but there was some careful argumentation that recognized, rightly so, hey, there is a profound difference between a particular company saying, we don't want to help you spread your ideas, and the government saying, you may not spread those ideas. That censorship or First Amendment rights have to do with what the government is not allowed to do. But if I don't know, let's say for the sake of argument, I know it's hard to imagine, but let's just suppose that you disagree with something I've been teaching on this podcast. You think I'm in error. And you come to me and say, RC, I would like to have time on your podcast in order to refute this idea that you have been propagating that I think is false. And if I say, no, I don't think so. Would I be guilty of violating your free speech? Of course not. Your right to free speech does not impose on me an obligation to give you access to what's mine. So when we had these, like as if it's over, as we struggle with this increasing willingness of media platforms to use their ideologies to propagate their own ideas, when we have a mass conspiracy to not talk in any wide-reaching mediums about Hunter Biden, we do a number of things. One, some people want to get the government involved and say, hey, you got to stop this. But when you do that, you invite the government to manage communications, which is the worst thing you could do. Sometimes instead we decide, hey, we recognize, well, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, they don't have a duty to allow me to propagate what I believe on their platform, so we're going to start our own. And so we've been through various and sundry short-lived conservative attempts to start something similar that hopefully would reach a critical mass, and most of them seem to fall pretty quickly as really not viable. And so we get frustrated. But there's another way for the market, which is that which is called to solve these kinds of problems, for the market to solve the problem. Let me put it this way. There's always this deep fear amongst those who don't trust in the market that the market will lead to monopolies, and monopolies will lead to oppression and exploitation. I remember learning as a high school kid, there's no such thing as a monopoly. There never will be a monopoly. That if somehow I manage to corner the market on oranges, well, people will start buying apples. If I corner the market on gasoline, people might turn to diesel or to natural gas or to burning vegetable oil or ethanol. You can't get it all. Well, there's a second reason why that can't happen. A second reason to overcome the danger of monopolies. If a monopoly seizes all the means of production in a given industry, and makes great profits, all that does is drive other people into that marketplace. Well, you can be driven into the marketplace by starting a competing company, or if the company's publicly traded, you can buy the company, which is where we at least potentially sit today. I don't want to present Elon Musk as some sort of ideological hero, or even that he might be like-minded with a conservative Christian like me. But I can believe not only that he has a deeper commitment to allowing people to speak freely than the people who are in charge today at Twitter, but he also has the wherewithal to buy Twitter. Because there is a demand, a market demand that says, you know what? We don't want this company silencing conservative voices. Now, you could end up with a multi-billionaire who's so profoundly conservative that he buys up Twitter and silences liberals. What do you do then? Well, here's what you do. They can try to start their own, or they can try to buy this one. Same way. Works out fine. The market is the solution. A couple of days ago, just for fun, I tweeted out a kind of list of things that I miss eating, most of which were menu items at national chains that no longer exist. I missed one. I meant to include cinnamon mini wheats. Oh man, those were good. Cinnamon mini wheats, but you can't find those anymore. But you know, the reason you can't find those is there's not enough market demand. And the fact that I like it doesn't mean anybody else likes it. I wish I could get a seafood and crab sandwich at Subway. But not enough people wish that for Subway to provide it. The market sometimes works, in a sense, against our own desires. But it does that because it's serving a greater market, a bigger market, and that's okay. I'm not called to protest or ask the government to intervene in order to get me the sandwich that I want. I'm not being cheated or done wrong. Same is true, by the way, when prices go up. I actually read an article today that suggested that the Jeep company, which is, I guess, part of Chrysler company, they're cheating their customers because their cars are selling above the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price. Well, why do you suppose Jeep dealers are selling Jeeps for more than Jeep makers suggest they sell them for? It's because Jeep buyers are willing to pay that much. Nobody's being cheated. Imagine you went into the marketplace to sell your goods and someone said, you know what, you don't have this qualification, you don't have that qualification, but I can see what you have and I value it more than people think I should. So I'm going to pay you twice what you were making. Can you imagine someone saying, oh, you're cheating that person? It's the same thing. Friends, at the end of the day, the market knows how to correct things that we find offensive. And if it doesn't, it's because the market doesn't care. I hope Mr. Musk makes things change at Twitter. I hope it becomes a freer place. I hope it becomes less embarrassingly left-leaning and left-approving. I think that'd be a wonderful thing. But if they don't, it's not the government's job. If they don't, it's the market being the market. So, just relax. We can hope. And maybe a day is coming when we can get back to getting our message out on that particular platform. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com and join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.